One of the things I love to do is have interesting conversations with fascinating people. Sandra Dee Robinson is a face you may recognize, is a name you've probably recognized, and caused her enormous amounts of pain in her youth. You'll find out more about Sandra Dee Robinson as we continue in the interview. And then we'll get some behind the scenes stuff, how she's able to work with corporate groups and horses to use the horses to help the people. It's fascinating. And also we'll talk about some behind the scenes stuff of what it's like to work. That's right. 23 hours in a day on a soap opera. Unbelievable. And all coming up on I Like That Story. Well, thank you for joining us today. We have a wonderful guest, and it is really my pleasure to connect with her. We've talked over time a number of different ways, but today it's about helping you get the most out of your life. And it's really a pleasure to have Sandra Dee Robinson, widely known as the charisma coach. Now I'm going to put an asterisk on that because here's the question. Can charisma be coached? Oh, we'll circle back and find that out. She helps mission-driven people become stronger communicators and relationship builders so they can step into work they feel called to do with confidence, clarity, and calm authority. Wow. To have those in your workspace. Well, she has a background of acting in Hollywood, speaking and coaching, and she supported thousands of experts in sharing their message with grounded confidence. Currently, her work sits at the intersection of, you're right at the street corners, of communication, leadership, and the wisdom of God's creation, drawing from the natural world and equine-assisted leadership experience. So this means horses, for those of you who don't know what equine is, but this is fascinating because when I last talked to Sandra, she really showed me some interesting things about the horse world that I was not aware of. So this is going to be an absolutely fascinating conversation. Sandra, how are you today?
I am awesome because I'm here.
Yeah. Now, you know that we send questions in advance, and we were talking about this before we officially started the interview. If you're going to get together with people, if you can, send them thought starters to think about. So when you get in, you just have really interesting conversations right away. Okay. So we've introduced you, but now we're going to have a little bit of fun before we get to the meat and potatoes of our interview today. So you got sent the Jeopardy board. Okay.
I did.
This is the question. Ask one question off the Jeopardy board.
Is this me asking you? This is me asking you.
You picked Jeopardy. Which one did you go with?
I went with the biblical
biblical
column,
banter.
Biblical banter.
For
and the
200,
question
right?
was, what is your favorite verse right now?
Right. What is your favorite Bible verse these days?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You're the second one who's pulled that out of all of them. So that must be a top-notch question.
Oh,
go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. What is it? What's your favorite verse these days?
It is Psalm 23.
Oh, okay.
And the interesting thing about Psalm 23, which for those that are not familiar, you will be as soon as I start to say it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now, when I wasn't familiar with the Bible, I thought this was a scary script. This was a scary verse because it says somewhere in there, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So looking at it now in the chapter that my husband and I are in right now, it's a whole different thing because when it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, that actually is an encouragement to not feel discouraged. We shall not want. We shall not be in need of the things that are required in order to make us healthy and happy. He makes me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. Still waters, water in a lot of contexts is referred to as if it was a reference to emotion. And a lot of the work that I do helps people with emotional regulation. So when I see the line leads me beside still waters, it's more than just being able to be calm. It's actually understanding that no, if you are in the valley of the shadow of death, you still can have that peace. You can still control your emotions and not have them control you and reach the outcome that you're looking for. I walked through the valley of the shadow of death. The important word there that I came up with was the word shadow. It's the shadow of death. That was the scary part for me when I first started looking. It's like, oh, that's when the people say at funerals, right? And it's, I
Yeah.
know,
So
yeah,
so I do funerals, as you know,
yes, I
hundreds
do.
of them, and
Yeah,
this is the one they want all the time. This is
yeah,
probably the number one. Do that Psalm 23.
right.
And
And it used to seem
yeah.
depressing to me. It used to seem depressing, and it's not anymore. I actually find it really comforting and empowering, and it keeps me with my head lifted, which is interesting.
So everybody has a different kind of walk that way. When did you start to get into the Bible and start to look at it? What was your process?
Interestingly enough, I was raised going to church. My mother chose a specific church. My father didn't really align with that church, but it was easier to go to where my mother wanted to go. And I asked a lot of questions in that church, and
Uh-huh.
they were not answered. So I went as I became an adult. I left. My father actually, once I left home, did go. I was the last kid to leave, so he did go back to his church actually. And his Bible, every time I come home, would be more and more worn. And so he was actually part of the impetus of me to start looking at the Bible again. Um,
Hmm.
but I explored other things. You know, I had a lot of different ideas that I wanted to just try out and see. Some of them were really short lived, and some of them I stayed with a little bit longer. I was fascinated by the Native American beliefs because I have such appreciation for the natural world. And in the end, I remember things went from being feeling pretty good, working a lot, having things all seem to kind of be in place to God saying, "Yeah, we need to teach her a little something." And I ended up homeless, sleeping on an air mattress in the back room of a friend's house who was gracious enough to let me live there. But it was not pleasant. I felt like I had lost everything. And at that point, I had a pastor say, "Would you like to accept Jesus?" And I said, this is actually what I said. It's not glamorous. It's not pretty. What the hell? Nothing else has worked. God will meet you where you are. That's
Oh my. Oh, that is so that is so good. I just heard a quote from Warren Buffett that said success is a lousy teacher, right?
oh,
And
yes.
and I just love that because you really learn most through suffering, which you don't want to hear, but it's actually the truth. And in my experience of talking to people, life will beat you up, and either it makes you angry, and if it makes you angry, you
Hmm.
kind of go down this dark road, and it never gets lighter,
Right.
or you get desperate. And when you get desperate, just as you said, what the hell?
What
Nothing
the
else is
hell?
working.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
And it was the best
desperation,
thing. It was the best thing I ever
yes,
did.
yeah, yeah,
And it was the
yeah.
best time. It was the worst time for sure. But it was the best time because the growth that I had during that time and just getting out of that valley made me so much stronger than if I had just sailed along and continued the way things were. So I'm really grateful for it. And definitely my life has changed. My journey, my walk with God is still continuing, and I have a lot of conversations with him throughout the day. So um
And
never alone.
I think there's power in that like a pastor and minister, people immediately get kind of defensive and they stay away from those guys. But if you're just an ordinary person living your life,
Yeah.
you can just be honest with people and they will accept that in a way. So a pastor cannot be honest. I mean, I remember talking to a pastor who one time said he was, you know, in a quiet men's group, was struggling with pornography, and in a week he was fired because they don't want their pastor to be flawed. And I feel
Mm,
bad for
that's
that guy.
unfortunate.
But
Yeah.
to the point, you are now basically you're working in a secular world. You're talking to businesses, you're talking to
Yep.
corporations, you're talking to people.
Yeah.
So how do you do that where you can? Do you talk about your faith at that time, or how do you walk that walk?
I even when I get speaking gigs or I'm doing a workshop or a retreat, a horse retreat for somebody or the company or an organization, I ask. I ask, like for instance, when I'm booking a speaking gig, I'll say, I use the word God in some of my stories. Is that going to be any kind of a problem? And I will get one of two answers. Well, one of three. Very rarely do I get, oh, that wouldn't be acceptable at all. Right. I just don't think I attract that. It just doesn't come my way.
Which is good. Then you get it out of the way. Okay, rinse and repeat. We're done. No,
Yeah.
that's right. Why
Yeah.
go there?
And
Okay,
then
yeah.
they'll say, yes, it's great. That's our thing. You can go as far as you want with that. And then I will. And if it's just, well, we don't want to make sure we don't ostracize anybody. I'm like, okay. And then I'll keep it kind of light. But even if I keep it kind of light, there are those people that will sense that they can come up and talk to me about something that is, on their mind regarding faith, and I'm happy to talk about that. I'm certainly not a pastor, but like as you said, I think walking the talk and just encouraging people, and my goal with the work that I do, especially the nature-based stuff that I'm really leaning on right now, is, as I said, God meets you wherever you are, right?
Right.
Like when you say, what the hell, nothing else has worked, there he was. And for some people, being forced to sit and look into a horse's eyes will all of a sudden open something for them. And they'll say to me, I feel like God touched me, or God looked at me, or God was speaking to me. And if that starts something for them and they start to seek that, then that's a good day. That's a great day.
Well, let's go there, because that's a great start to this whole thing with horses, and I'll just
Yeah.
explain my perspective. Sandra and I were asked at one time to speak to groups, and I was going to tell them America's story because we're coming up on the 250th birthday. And she was going to have something to do with horses, which I immediately thought was a dude ranch, or must be going to a dude ranch somewhere. And I don't really know much about dude ranches, except that you get on a horse and you walk a trail, and I think I've maybe ridden like four horses in my life. It wasn't a great experience. They're kind of intimidating creatures. They say, well, a horse knows if you're afraid. Well, great. I don't want the horse to know I'm afraid, because he's going to mess around with me. So that little speech did not help me. And so then I'm talking to Sandra, who she said, no, 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 no. That's not what we do. That's not what this is about at all.
Mhm.
And I will paraphrase this so you'll know that I was paying attention at the time. Sandra says, we get these high pressure people. They fly in from the coasts. They are jittery. They're on their various devices. And the horses are on the other side of the corral. They will not go anywhere near them because they are wound tight.
Yeah.
And the horses know that. So they have to put their devices away, and they have to just sit there for a while. And this is hard to do if you're a wired person, but eventually they calm down, and then somehow the horses select the person they want to be with. And they have this innate wisdom, and they just show up, and they in the presence of a horse. Or I would say the same with livestock, except pigs, cattle, sheep, horses. They just have a calmness to them. And when they're calm, you're calm.
Yep.
And then they become more calm, and then you become more calm. Horses have a different level of, I don't know, in the fullness of time, we'll probably see how it works out. But I sometimes wonder if there's if they're like angels on four legs, maybe dogs the same way. They can
Yeah.
see you and kind of speak to you in a way, and you see, you know, there's three dimensions, but there's like a fourth dimension too. There's a spiritual dimension that you
Yep.
can kind of see through a little bit and go, wow, that is.
Hmm.
Anyway, so that was, And then you said some horrible things that I didn't realize.
Horrible things.
Well, you said how they break horses and with tripwires and stuff like. Well, what?
Oh yeah.
Now your husband's a stunt man, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Well, he's officially retired now. I
Right.
mean, if somebody gave him a driving job or something, he'd probably jump into it. But I've kind of encouraged him to give up the hitting the ground for cash these days. So, yeah.
Here's what happened. You lose your suspension over time. You realize your springs, you know, I used to be able to jump off a high, and now a curb, and it just jars up and down my spine. I'm not happy with it, but that's the way it is. But anyway, I like watching Westerns, and you find out that the terrible things they did to these
Yeah.
horses, that when the horses were supposed to fall in this particular scene, it wasn't the rider that guided them down. There's like a tripwire that they
Yeah.
fell over. Is that right?
In the old Westerns, yes.
Oh
Now we
my.
have a guy, Tommy Turvey, I think is his name. I'll shout out to him. He and his family have been training horses for video film for I think generations at this point. His kids, his little kids are now doing trick riding and things like that. He is one of those people that will train the horse to fall. And it's
Hmm.
fascinating to see him do this. They put pads down and they do this over and over again. And it looks like what the Westerns looked like, but they're not maiming and killing horses. And so it's really hard for me to watch the old ones for sure. But what they can get horses to do now is amazing. And he even called Alan one day. Alan took one picture with a horse and he starts getting phone calls. That's how his industry is. Hey, we need you to come and do some horse stuff. Alan's like, I don't actually, that's not who that's not what I do. Sure enough, Tommy gets him and they go downtown Austin and Alan is put on this horse and they said he can be a little tough. And I'm thinking they really think that Alan can ride. And now Alan is really energetically, I am so proud of him. He has become such a horseman and such a calm presence that he's wonderful with them. But this was way back in the beginning of us having the horse farm, and he was still learning how they operate and how to stay in the saddle and all this stuff. And they put him on this horse that just, he was real worried because at one point they wet down the pavement and he had to gallop.
They
the
always
horse.
wet down the
They
pavement. 'Cause
always went down the pavement.
They always do. Yeah.
And he got through it. I was like, dude, he goes, well, I couldn't mess up in front of Tommy, right? I couldn't mess up in front of the guy. It's that competitiveness in the stunt world. But yeah, he has since become quite being around the retreats when we started doing the work with the horses. He was my very underpaid assistant for a very long time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
And then we kind of threw him into the category of risk manager. Yeah. So he would get up and tell all the rules.
So talk about the retreats. How does that work?
Yeah. Most of the time is going to be, it'll be an organization, people that know each other or sometimes they don't, but they work at the same company. So I shouldn't say they know each other, but they're somehow connected. Right.
Okay.
And as you said, that is true. A lot of times we would do groups, and primarily I'm focusing now on working with women, but in the past we've had groups that were men, women, all different ages, all parts of the world. At one point we had a tech company that came back time and time again, and every time they'd bring people from different countries, and they may know each other from Zoom calls or from exchanges in email, but they had never sat together before, and there was a cohesion that was missing, partly because of culture and partly because of time zones and things like that. They just didn't feel like they were clicking in their communication. And so that was one of the reasons that they came to us. So when folks come, they arrive, let's just say I'll use a group of women, for example, because we know ladies like to chat. So they'll arrive in a bus or a limo or whatever, and they'd get out, and you can just feel the energy because we've been sitting with the horses for a while. And do let me, at some point, I'll tell you why that feeling of being calm around these animals is so, because there's some science behind it. So we've been in this state where we've probably said some prayer. We are ready for this group, and they just come a buzzing, right? This is like a hive coming closer. And it's not just the horses. Like there's actually a part of us that wants to go, oh, and then we realize, oh no, we have to mitigate this. This is what we're here for. And so the first thing we do, you're right. We say, we're going to take your phones away from you. And there's a moment of panic. There's always at least one or two that say, but I have to hold on to it. It's amazing once that thing goes into the bucket. And if it's an emergency, it will not a bucket. It's actually, it's a cute bucket. It's a cute bucket. Everything was cute at the farm. And so at the end, we knew we were successful getting them into their present moment and experiencing the present moment when at least one person would come running back in saying, I forgot my phone.
Oh,
that would be, oh, good. We got him there. Because in the beginning, we would wonder that buzz took a while to simmer down. We would circle up in the back underneath the oak trees, and we would do a few exercises, a few questions to kind of break the ice and get people to actually talk as humans to one another, not just coworkers and or networking partners or something, kind of get into a different state. Mm-hmm. And then we'd go over and observe the horses. Believe it or not, at that point, they're still buzzing too high. The horses would remain on the other side, but we would get in there and start moving them around. And our number one question was, tell us which one you think is the leader. We could instantly tell which people thought certain things about leadership by their answers.
Oh. You sneaky Pete.
It's sneaky. All right. And you're right. I do. Anyway, that's how I work it. I let even my private clients choose the horse that they're working with. I never would say, we're going to work with this horse today because this horse has a gift and blah, blah, blah. Right. Mm-hmm. I don't know what is going to happen that day, but I can promise it's going to be brutally honest. So it's a fantastic process to just facilitate. I don't even take much of the credit for the things that occur. What I do take credit for is I think I've had a fascination with nature and communication since I was itty bitty. My brother.
How long does this process take? Is this a day, a weekend? What is it?
We can do a workshop in a couple of hours, which is kind of like dipping a toe in the water. And I don't expect deep change from that, but it's an adventure for some organizations and companies. But I really like to do the 2 and 3 day. And the 3 day is actually 2.5. But at the end of the first day, there's a real difference in how people are holding themselves, even the expression on their face, and how you can see that they have relaxed from the inside out, and they're now much more they're much more aware of what's going on in their body. Because so often when we go, we may even have something going on and we're just going to ignore it and keep pushing through it because we have stuff to do. There's stuff to do. We do that with mental catches. We do that with physical catches. And sometimes it takes a moment to be able to just sit in quietness and recognize, oh, I have some tightness in my back there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And
well,
then
you talked about the 23rd Psalm, which speaks that God is a shepherd and you are a sheep. A shepherd never runs. A shepherd is not, unless there's a catastrophe, the job is not to run the sheep. The job is to be with and stroll with the sheep. Yes. And one of the questions I'll ask myself and others is that if you're in a perpetual state of running, that's not what you were made to be. And something's off, right? So you've got to figure out how to slow down. And, if God's the one that's in charge, well, he's taking you exactly the right pace. You don't need to, you need to run ahead of him, just trying to relax. And so it's both a metaphor, but also reality as you are teaching people about this.
Yes.
So I'm going to circle back because you said that you were a charisma coach. Is that right? Yeah. And then I said to myself, now, wait a minute. I always thought that charisma was something you had. You're just born to it, and that person walks in. That person's charismatic, which I would describe as somebody who I am attracted to. not necessarily for their appearance. There's just something about them that attracted me to
Mhm.
them.
Something magnetic.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, that's it in essence. And I want to be clear, I didn't give myself that name. That was given to me when I was doing media. I was doing a talk show, and so somebody in the media put a label at the bottom that said charisma coach, and my first thought was, well, that's really corny.
Yeah.
And then it stuck. And my first company was called Charisma on Camera, so it made sense at the time, but charisma really is that attractor factor. Now I refer to essence as the truest piece of us that we can lead with when we're being most honest in who we're being. Now, some people would say that would be authentic, but I think authentic sometimes has been overused and polluted over the last couple of years. But that essence is really when somebody gives up trying to be the boss that came before them, the expectations that the parent had, eventually it's taking all those layers off and going, this is what lights you up. This is what people see and love about you. And this is the way you show up best. And when you give somebody that permission, and I see that when we bring people into the present moment with the horses and out there in nature, I see that piece of them show up. The childlike quality, the curiosity, the stuff that makes them light up actually shows up so much easier when we're not in anxiety about the future or worried or depressed about things that have happened in the past.
And so if you're watching and you'll say, well, here is why we put these labels on the paint can. Otherwise, you're going to forget, right? I too struggle a little bit with America's storyteller. But if you just say, blah, 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 they don't listen. And if you were to say, well, Sandra says, well, I help people overcome, and I work through their various things to help them face. And they go, well, I don't know what that is. Well,
Well,
I'm the charisma coach. Oh, okay. I remember that.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
afterwards, well, I want the charisma coach. And then you're able to explain actually what it is. But if you don't have something catchy, it'll slip through and they won't remember it.
Isn't
And
that
then, oh,
interesting? Yeah.
so I think that's just the reality that we have to label ourselves so people can remember a little bit what
Yeah.
we are actually trying to get to. And what you're saying is that charisma, maybe you've morphed it to a sense of clarity and purpose and
Hmm.
confidence that we might
Yeah.
then describe as charisma,
Yes.
depending on who we're talking to, right? Yeah.
Yes. And if somebody, I'm sure you can think of a time, you spoke to so many people. I'm sure you can think of a time when you see somebody that goes from having a general conversation to hitting that thing that makes them light up. It could be
No.
their grandkids, it could be their passion work, it could be their hobby, but you see them literally, if you're really getting nitty gritty, you can see the pupils dilate. They flush a little bit. There's actual physical reactions that we subconsciously will pick up and go, "Oh, they're really enthusiastic about this." And enthusiasm, which actually translates to God with us, God within us, that enthusiasm is really magnetic. And so, being able to express what lights you up is actually something that is a really huge element to what people know as charisma.
To be able to express what really lights you up.
Lights you up. Hmm.
I'm writing that down.
Instead of hiding it. I was listening to uh, some uh, some folks, some specialists uh, that teach it. I believe it was Stanford. They teach it, and they were saying they had a game or a quiz that they would do in their class, and they said, "All right, tell us in 5 years if you keep doing what you're doing, where are you going to be?"
Hmm.
Students would write down, in 5 years, if your plan A doesn't work, give us a plan B. Where would you be? And the students would write it down. And then the instructor would say, okay, now just go crazy. If money was not an obstacle and you could do anything without, and I love that he added this, without people making fun of you, what would that be? And they
Hmm.
would sit for a while and sometimes struggle, and they would inevitably, they'd write something down. And then he would have them read that to the class. And he said at the end, he would say, all right, for those of you that heard everybody talk about the three possibilities for their life. How many of you think that your partner, maybe they had partnered them up? He says, how many of you think that the outrageous, crazy idea is actually where they should go? And all the hands would go up.
Sure.
Because that's what lit them up.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they were more interesting to watch, to be around, to listen to, when it was the thing that lit them up. I mean, that's how I knew that I wanted to work with horses, is because I would just go a little bit into what I had seen and what I had experienced and what I understood about them in a way they can help human beings and save our species, is actually one of the keynotes that I'm giving now. And as soon as I would even tap into that a little bit, they would want more about that topic. And I'm like, well, that's interesting.
Because that topic lit you up. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Hmm.
And I didn't come to talk about the horses perhaps, but that's what they started to kind of want to know more about. And I think that is, I think that's probably key to being a good storyteller too, is to have that enthusiasm.
Well, so because you look at the cycles of people's lives and they're very, very common, right? First quarter of life, what's my purpose? I don't even know. I got to figure it out. And so to the Stanford class, I guess I'll do this because nobody likes to have no answer. And this seems like a safe answer. And then you got to drop that plate because you're in the second quarter of life, which is a family and a marriage and a lot of noise going on and a mortgage to pay. And it's not really about you at this quarter of life. Now, in the third quarter of life, kids start to leave the house, the mortgage starts to look manageable, and you start to say, wait a minute. What was I made to do again? And I've had enough life experience that I can figure that out.
Yep.
And I was interviewing a guy last week who I thought, had it going on. And he said that I didn't really figure out that I was made to be a teacher till I was like 55. I didn't figure out that I was made to be a storyteller till I was 57. And I'm asking, when did you figure out that you were really about using horses to help people? When, that tuning fork moment where if I did this all day long, I could do this for the rest of my life and never wear out and never lose exuberance.
Yeah.
When did you find that out?
Well, it's twofold. I have to go back a bit because you talked about the stages of life. And when I was in, there's probably high school, they did some sort of a skills test and said, this is what you'd be good at. Then it came out as teacher. And I went, oh no, I was so shy. We talked about being introvert. I was so shy that there was no way. I was being bullied. I never wanted to even be seen. Yet I would leave school and do plays and commercials and things like that. But in that world where they were saying, you're going to be a teacher.
Now hold on just a second. You were a pretty girl. Who in the world bullies a pretty girl in their class? What's that about?
Other girls.
Oh, the mean girls. Oh,
yeah.
Them.
Yeah. Yeah. It was bad. It was bad. And so but it was also great because I understand what it feels like to be beat up. But the interesting thing is I didn't see myself as a teacher until somebody finally put me in that position when I was trying desperately to get over my fear of speaking and being seen as myself. I was an actor because it didn't have to be me. But when I had to be me on camera, it was terrifying. I would fall to pieces. And so I was going to all these different instructors and classes. And I had one woman that was teaching on camera presence. And she said, can you start teaching my newbies for me? Because I don't really want to do those anymore. I'm like, I'm not a teacher. I went back to what I thought when I was young. I'm not a teacher. That's not what I do. Well, I decided to give it a try. And lo and behold, guess what?
Right.
It was easy. I liked it. And I loved seeing people reach the point of confidence that they wanted to be. And in that case, they were going out and booking jobs and making money because they were able to hit that level of comfort on camera and things. And so that was the first step going, well, maybe I can be a teacher. And then I loved the work that I did helping people on camera and helping them to tell stories with some skills and things like that. But there was more. And when I first saw what horses could do, and it was a therapy situation, not for me, but I'd actually gone to visit a farm in the Midwest with an amazing woman that had these children coming to her from all over the world. They were being rescued from sex trafficking and various similar situations. And she said the horses will open them up. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'd only ridden horses, right? That's what most people think. If I'm not riding them, what am I going to do with them?
Yeah.
And it was a reframe for me, that it was actually about relationship building. It was about something so much more. It was a few years later that I discovered that there was a thing called equine-assisted coaching. Like, what is this magic? And long story short, I ended up wanting to do the work myself because my fascination with animals and my intuitiveness with them and my desire to understand how they communicated made me realize that the particular people that I was around that were doing this type of work, while I love that they're getting people out into nature, they were missing a lot of the cues from the animals themselves. And I wanted the animals to have a voice in this too. Relationship is two-way. It's not just, it's really important in the work that I do that it is not a dominant submission, which is the riding of the horse, right? It's a partnership. It's a relationship.
The horse should be able to say nay.
Okay, yes.
That was.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
That was too. I shouldn't have said that.
It's funny though. I do like it. You get credit for that one. And then our answer though isn't just to take the no. It's why no. It's why no. Why do you not want to get in the trailer? And eventually you realize a trailer to a horse, from their perspective, is a dark cave.
Sure.
They can't get out of it. They can't get out of it. That's the worst place that they could ever put themselves physically.
Right.
So it has to be the trust in you, which comes back to relationship.
And then you said last time we talked, I remember you saying you put a saddle on a horse. They know it's a dead animal skin.
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
And you're putting on their back, which is where predators jump when they're going to kill the horse. They jump on their back. Yeah. So a horse literally has trust issues. And certainly, obviously, they would. I mean,
sure.
These are their biggest fears.
They still come around. And by the way, that was a reference to Buck Brannaman, so I have to credit him for saying that. He was the first one that he's a natural horsemanship practitioner who's just amazing. The movie Horse Whisperer was actually he consulted on that, and it was actually in reference to him. He says that he said, not only do they allow us to jump on their backs like a predator would, but we actually throw the carcass of another dead animal on and get on top of that. And it just, when I tell that to people, when I'm working with a woman with her horse right now, and she said, "Do you want me to go get the halter?" I'm like, no, we're not doing any of that. We didn't do anything like that for the first 2 sessions, first 2 hours we were together. We didn't, or actually 3 hours. We didn't touch any kind of control device. It was just about relationship. And that's where you start.
When I talk to people and try to help them figure out where they're at in the world, I say, let's just look at Venn diagrams. Let's just say that one person out of 1,000 can be a teacher. I'll make that number up. Let's just say 1 out of 1,000, a natural teacher. Let's say that one person out of 1,000 is really drawn to horses and how they connect with people. Well, when those two intersect, you're now one person in a million, if I got that right. So
I like
this is where we start to see how we can be unique in the world when we start combining those intersecting circles, right? So maybe if you intersect that with, children or people with disabilities or trafficked women, whatever, we see that you start to become more rare and more valuable when these start to intersect. In a very, completely opposite way, Steve Jobs loved calligraphy. It was a hobby of his. Well, nobody else in the computer world really cared about it. So when he put up, I think he's the one who invented the word process, the concept of Microsoft Word. It's because he liked calligraphy. And he understood that letters needed to be in slightly different positions because it was his passion. So he just happened to be that guy who happened to know about words and calligraphy and about computers. So it's when we intersect these, there's nothing tangible about who you are. If we bring that sideways thing and connect it, now we start to get all those plates spinning in a way that really feels good.
Yeah. Now, and you said something though, Jeff. You said something before about working in your passion, and I think the thing that sometimes people may miss if they find that intersection like you're talking about is they go, oh, but I couldn't do this for a living,
Oh,
because they do it for free. And that's the scary thing. Is like I found myself doing at times doing jobs that I loved because it was in alignment with everything that intersection. And I would do them for free until somebody would go, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, oh, right. Okay. It's okay for me to charge for this, right?
and
It's okay.
isn't this why we think that artists are underpaid? Because an
Yes.
artist gets so much compensation from the creative process. Musicians will work all night, for $200. You go, what are you
Right.
doing? Well, I love it. Okay, do you love
Yes.
it that much? You're starving to death. Well, part of that is part of that we have to overcome our obstacles of insufficiency, and we have to realize that this has a value, and then we have to step forward in that value and say, and just rolling back to scripture, if God made you to a purpose and you actually start to find out what that purpose is, and you ask, well, I guess I'm going to be starving to death. No, I don't see that. Anywhere in scripture, I see a double portion measured out. I've been
Mm-hmm.
packed down, overlapping.
Mm-hmm.
I see all of this abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be a billionaire, because obviously money has its own issues that maybe you don't want to have any part of. But to have a joyous life that's overflowing and full of contentment and peace, well, isn't that real prosperity?
And
That's what you want.
isn't that Psalm 33 says,
Yeah,
with, yes, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have all of the things. What that means to me personally, anyway, is that it's overflowing in that the stuff I can give more. I have more availability to support things and people that need it, because money is a tool and
yeah.
it's a very valuable tool for life. So I had to realize that, yes, I would
And a
do this work for
shackle.
free. It
Money is a
can be.
tool and a
Yes.
shackle, so you got to be
Yes.
careful,
That's
right? Yeah,
good.
yeah.
That's good. Yeah. It's
So
true.
you're a person who has been on the edges, in the middle of, surrounded by um, fame,
Mm.
the power of fame, the adoration of the crowd. They're like, wow, and they know you and they want to be close to you because you're not just Sandra Dee Robinson. You're Sandra Dee Robinson. I've seen you on this particular show, or I've watched you on
Mhm.
television, right? Um, it's both very very enticing and also a little risky and maybe a little dangerous. Can you talk
Yeah.
about your experiences with that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I learned from that experience, if somebody says, what's a bit of advice you would give? And I learned really quickly, never believe what other people say about you, whether it's good or bad. Because if it's not God's voice and it's not your intuitive voice, it doesn't belong to you. So that goes for people that say, oh my gosh, you can't do anything wrong, to the people that say, you're fat, you're this, you're that. Because when you have that platform of visibility, that's going to come. And now we see it in social media, even for kids that are in school. And the bullying is now different than it was when I was in school. But it's still other people's opinion of you. And yes, it is intriguing. And it was fun in some circumstances for sure, because they would be so in love with the show, with the character that I was playing, that it was interesting to see that that made them happy to see me and the other cast members and to go to those events. What was scary about it was, yeah, I had, at one point I had somebody waiting outside my house, for many days, and I'd have people follow me home. And I was very afraid of people. I was afraid of touch in the beginning. I didn't grow up in a family that hugged. And so literally I was afraid of touch. So that's something that I also think that working with the horses has helped me a ton
Hmm.
with, to be able to understand that, because a lot of horses don't like touch. To them, it's work. They haven't been treated well. And so it's so interesting that life can come back around again. And I can actually help people by understanding what it's like to go through this myself, as I'm watching the horses go through it. But one of the interesting things about meeting the fans, especially when I was on the soaps, because soap opera actors, and I know there's still some out there, not as many as there used to be, soaps, but we're in the living room every single day. We're with somebody every single day. And so they have a sense of really knowing us as opposed to a film star, which sometimes people may hang a little bit back from. We would have people come up and just want to touch and hug. And it was a point of frustration and fear for me in the beginning until somebody said, "Oh, sweetie," and it's the simplest thing on the planet. She said, "Just say, 'Hi, how are you?' as they walk up and put your hand out to shake it."
So
they're
you
not going
shake
to
their
hug you if your hand's out there.
Sure, just run. Okay, nice.
How
You know,
simple is that, right? I
yeah,
mean, and I still think of the day she told me that, I felt like a knucklehead, but I was like, oh my gosh, you just saved me.
genius idea. Genius idea. Say, I've always wanted to ask this question. Uh, Soap operas. I mean, not as many as they used to be, but a daily passion for many people. And
Yes,
Friday rolls around, you got to have that cliffhanger.
of
And the
course.
door opens, and then they have a shot of your face for an uncomfortably long, like 15 or 20 seconds,
Yes.
where you must go like it can go anywhere. So you just kind of have this strange.
Yes, exactly.
And when you get that script, do you know what's coming up on Monday?
Yes.
You do. So you
Yes.
do know that it's
I do.
when the door opens, you do know that it's going to be Victor or whoever, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
tell you because of
They do.
this poor actor. She's got to open the door and go, okay,
I
this
have no
could be
idea
a
who this is going to
serial
be. I got to
killer.
cover
This
all the
could be.
emotions. Yeah. No, no, but not a lot in advance. We would get scripts, but not all that much in advance. I mean, honestly, the people would make fun of the writing of soaps and things, but these writers are writing nonstop
Yeah, yeah. It's a
all year
what a
long.
grind. What a
35 for my
grind.
character alone, 35 pages of dialogue a day when I was a lead role, which was most of the shows that I was on. So I got used to that burden, but
How many
I
words
don't
is
know, that would
that?
be hard as a writer.
Okay, now
You know,
wait a minute. How many words is that? I mean, how do you memorize that? I mean,
it's
can
a
you
lot.
really?
Yes. Yeah, you can. And it's a technique that I kind of accidentally fell into.
Okay.
Two things, Jeff. I have to say two things because I was talking to someone just the other day, and they also worked in a very similar industry. And I said, I discovered that people that have a memory that is more photographic sometimes do better when it comes to memorizing scripts of that length over that short period of time. Because I was able to say, if I would go up on a line, meaning forget a line in rehearsal, I would say, okay, it's on page 54. It's the top, the very top, or it's the middle.
You
What's
have a
the line?
photographic memory.
But,
You do.
but, but
Yeah.
Jeff, I would lose it. I would lose the content of the day's work as soon as the day was done. So
Yeah.
in one case, they said, oh, we have to go back and reshoot. It was a 12-hour day or something, which was a short day, 12 hours. And they said,
Oh
oh, something
no.
happened. We have to go back and reshoot the first scene. I panicked because I throw my script out when I'm done with that scene. I throw the script away, and I panicked, and they looked at me like I had three heads. Like, what is wrong with you? You've already done it. I said, no, it's gone. It's cleared. It's like the space is empty. I had to actually get somebody to find the script and bring it back to me, and of course, it came back as I looked at it. But I really panicked. I absolutely panicked because it was gone. It was gone.
Did
So
you? I mean, did you like your character or not?
I had to like the characters. How could you not? I mean, I had to like the characters. There were some that were more fun than others. So the villains are always more fun than the good
Right.
girls. Yeah, because really there's no limit to how crazy you can be if you're a villain. So
Right.
it's
Right.
way more fun than the good girl. Because playing a good girl, I played a good girl for 9 years, and I cried, at least 3 times a week because I was hurt from something, and I hated to cry. So it was was really hard. It
So
was
as
really
the
hard
good
for me.
girl in a soap opera, you're run over like 8 times a week
Yes.
by
Yes.
mean girls and manipulative guys and heartbreakers.
Yep.
And then they
Yep.
look at the characters. You say, well, this particular character, if my math is right, has been married 17 times, has had like 75 children, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the child that you had in math 2 years ago walks in the door as a teenager because they grow up so fast, right? Yeah.
That was my first role that I ever played. I was taking over for, like, I think she was 8 or 9 years old, and all of a sudden I walk in and I'm 16. It was like a week difference between the last little actor and me. And the audience somehow, God bless them, went with it, you know?
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. They
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 went
know
with
the
it.
team. Okay.
Yeah.
We know this kid's gonna go off the stage left. I went, oh, here she is. And don't they still do portraying the actor? Blah, blah, blah. They just put a new person in and you just swap in a new person, right?
I think I mean, I don't remember that so much unless they have, like, maybe a little caption that
Yeah.
says, and they make an announcement in the fan, clubs and all that kind of stuff on the Facebook groups, and so everybody knows. But yeah,
I have
yeah.
to say, that sounds like a crummy job. I mean, 12 hours on
Oh,
a
that was a
short
short
day.
day. That was a
Yeah.
short day.
Okay, so
Yeah,
how is it 14-hour days, 16-hour
yeah.
days?
On average, on average. The only difference was when I was on Bold and the Beautiful. That's a half-hour show. And that was awesome. 'Cause then I was actually working like a 9 to 5, which I would go skipping out because I could actually see daytime. I'd come in the dark, but I would walk out and it would still be light outside. So that was great. That was a
And
really super
what
fun.
was the longer one?
Uh, the longest days I ever had were the hour shows, but I started on a show called Another World. And the week that I started, Jeff, there was wasn't a writer strike. It was a cameraman strike. It was a union strike. The executives are running the cameras. Okay. To make it worse. Oh, this gets much worse. To make it worse. Okay. We had a party. It was like a wedding that was written in, and they write the weddings and the big parties and stuff for these shows well in advance. And so they couldn't do anything about it. The storyline is moving and that there's going to be this wedding. And what that means is you've got many more cats to herd on the floor. There's a lot more actors and extras, and there's just a ton more stuff to do. They usually will run really, really long. Those days will be really, really long because they move from one area to another. And if one actor is out of place, then they have to start back over and do the move again. And so it was going to be a long day anyway. My first 2 days were 21 and 23 hours long.
Wow.
I was so happy to be working. I didn't care. I was so happy to be there. I
Now,
just
you
come up
can't.
from Pittsburgh, and there I am working in New York City. So
This is okay. So you have to be taking some kind of a booster or speed or amphetamines, right? You can't.
no,
You
I'm so
can't.
hyper. Oh my gosh, you give me a Red Bull and my heart will be beating out of my chest. I mean, I can't do any of that stuff.
Wow.
I can't do that. But
So,
no, I was just excited. I was excited to be there. That was
how old
was
were you at
my
that time?
dream. Just turned 18.
Wow. Well, I
Yeah.
guess that would be your dream, wouldn't it?
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, I want to talk about that. I sent you this question in advance. I hope you don't find it intrusive, but I have a problem with women and age. I'm a naturally curious guy, and I will ask
Okay.
guys, "Well, how old are you?" And I don't see age as a negative thing. I always tell people I'm at level 64, right? Because not everybody makes it to level 64, and I'm working. It gets a little bit tougher. Each level gets a little bit harder. So I see it as an achievement. But I remember asking a woman who the numbers weren't actually, she seemed very young to me, but wait, she's done a lot of things. And I asked, well, how old are you? And she just gave me this stunned look that I felt kind of bad about. And if somebody else says, you never ask a girl her age, I thought, okay, I get it. But also that kind of makes me a little bit angry on behalf of women, because it's for gosh sakes, you're at level, right? And you have achieved that level. And eventually it becomes you're not known by your exterior. You're known by your interior, your character. You want to
Yeah.
be that person who is charismatic and attractive when they're in their 70s, not at all because of their appearance, but because they have something, right?
Yeah. That
And
essence.
why
That
and we let
essence.
no, we'll kind
Yes.
of let guys do that. Women will complain about that. Well, guys get to be craggy and distinguished. And I say, well, why don't you get to be, charismatic? Why
Mm.
don't you get to be? And this comes as a tragedy to me when I see people trade an extra 10 years of looking 15 years younger through various cosmetic
Mhm.
things in exchange for literally being a mask, unable to show emotion when they're older. And can you talk about? I can't get on that soapbox. I'm not allowed to. But this
Yeah.
is your chance to either agree or refuse. Let's just talk about that.
There's a multi-layered answer. It can be, because I understand why. I really understand why women feel that they have to stop the clock. Asking a woman her age, I think maybe it's still uncool to do that, but to be quite honest, you can find it. Go to the internet. I mean,
Hmm.
I quit avoiding the question because it's easy to find, right? I mean, you put my name in, there's a whole page and a half of Google, tells you all about me, mostly true, and it will tell you the true age. And so I what's the point of lying about it or trying? I do understand trying to look good, because I am now to the point where I look in the mirror sometimes and go, who is that? I don't, I don't know who that is. I don't feel like that age at all. I'm still skipping up and down the stairs, and I said to my husband somewhere, we watched a commercial, and I said, I think I can do a cartwheel. Like, I'm gonna go do a cartwheel. And he's like, okay, I'll spot you. My stuntman husband,
Hmm.
I'll spot you. So I don't physically or mentally think about age until somebody actually asks me. And there have been times, Jeff, that I have had to do the math. I've had to sit there and go, wait, am I I see. Okay. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter to me. But I do understand, especially the business that I was in for the first over half of my life, all about looks and being in comparison, which is
You
just
wrote an
a
article about
poisonous.
that
I
comparison.
did. I did. Yeah. It was a story that had come from right before I met my husband. And had a writing coach that kept saying, you got to write this down. And so I finally did. And it became a series that I wrote about the thieves of happiness. And comparison it was the first one, because I think it's the number one thief of happiness, especially for women, but I think for men as well.
Teddy Roosevelt said that. Probably not as eloquently as you did, but he
Oh,
said, "Isn't comparison is the thief of contentment or something like that."
okay.
A
Yeah.
lot of people can claim that. I think that's what when you Google and type a quote in, you realize that a wise quote a lot of times has 60 different authors. So
Mhm.
make it
Yes.
your own. I say, just yeah.
Yes. It's so true that, I could tell you
I,
that story about the comparison if you want me to go there.
what's that now?
I could tell you the story about the comparison.
Yeah, go ahead, please do.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
It was, and it might, I just feel like it might help somebody out there. So I was miserably single and going out with all of my girlfriends, and they were all quite pretty. So there would be attention and this and that, right? But none of these guys were coming even close to. I mean, we had so many stories. We could write a very funny book about the characters that were inauthentic that we all dated, and we just shared these stories with each other and would just sit there and laugh. And so I would
Did
say
any of them say, "So, what's your sign?" Let me guess.
probably
Are you a
we
Capricorn?
had them say, oh, I just want to be monogamous. And they were actually, one guy was dating two of us, the same guy, and telling us, and we looked alike, and we realized it pretty quickly, right? But it was pretty funny. She showed me a picture of him. I go, yeah, that's him. So we had
Yeah,
so many things. Clunker Chris was in it. We all gave him nicknames because we didn't want to use our real name, but Clunker Chris was one guy. And he showed up. Look, I mean, we first saw him, my girlfriends and I were out, and like, he was stunning. He looked like a Christopher Reeve with this
Yeah.
gorgeous
Yeah. Yeah.
long coat. And I mean, like dressed to the nines. So, and so I end up going out with him, and he shows up in the exact same outfit, which let me know he's an actor and he stole it from costume. Because the car didn't match the outfit at all. Like at all. And it went downhill from there where, but we had so many stories. And so this was my life at the time, that my girlfriend, who I had, had her move into my building. We had moved to LA about the same time. We had both worked on a show in the past. She was in production though. She was a producer. And she worked so hard. She literally came with, I think, $200 in her pocket and was now running 2 or 3 shows that were very well known, excellent. All she did was work. Never even realized that she wanted to date, let alone she announced, I'm getting married. Like, what? I'm getting married at a castle in France. Oh, okay. In the Loire Valley. There will be fireworks. And there were. I mean, it was extraordinary. I was very happy for her, as it was proven when I ugly cried that into the camera as they came around and said, say something to the bride and groom. It was my Bridget Jones moment, you could say, because there I am in this beautiful atmosphere. I had borrowed a gown that somebody offered to me. It was a $4,000 gown that I'm wearing. I mean, I should feel fantastic. And instead, I'm running off to the restroom every so often when I have to have a cry, because I'm feeling sorry for myself. This is a pity party for me, right? And the second stall on the left was open every single time. So that became my crying stall. I would walk in and there it was. And I'd go in and I would cry and I'd come out, wipe my makeup down as best I could and go back to the kids' table. Yes, she sat me at the kids' table because I was the only one over the age of 12 that was single.
Oh boy.
Everybody else was paired. And
now, how old were you at this time?
37.
Was a biological clock ticking there too? I don't know. Do you have children?
No, it never happened. It never happened. For various reasons. That's a whole nother show. But
yeah, okay. but anyway, you're 37. You're 37. The world says you should be connected somehow by this.
Should be connected. Right? I have friends that are connected, having kids, the whole thing. Yeah. And I'm looking around going, this is so unfair. Poor me, woes me, right? And I realized that as I was doing this, and I really was happy for her. I was stoked for her. But at the end of that night, I thought, you know what? What is going on? Why am I comparing myself to somebody? We're nothing alike. Look at what she chose to do for a living. What I do, like, I wouldn't want her husband. This isn't the life that I want. I don't want to move to France. So why am I doing this? And I realized I'm going to break up with comparison right now because it's really bogging me down. And I realized I was doing the same thing when I was going out with my friends. Which one is wearing the cuter outfit? This is insane. Which one's attracting the cuter guy? Who? Right. That's not doing me any good. So I said, I broke up with comparison. I've changed the lock and the whole thing. And I went home and going out with my friends, I said, at 9:00, I'm going to go home. They stayed out and did their thing. I went home and I sat with my cat. I even lit a fire for myself and poured myself a glass of wine. And what I learned was I was okay. I'm pretty okay to hang out with. And I had to get to that point where I said, God, if you want me to be single, fine. I'm okay. I am good. And I think it was maybe at the most 3 weeks later that I went on the first date with my husband, and I knew instantly. 3 weeks.
Were there bells? Were there chills? Did your foot kick up when you kissed him? All the stuff.
No, it was just. I don't know. The best way I could describe it is so comfortable. He took me to go see a movie, a classic movie. It was a great first date. But outside of all the details, the movie was 4 hours long.
Oh,
I'm hyper. I have a lot of energy. Like at the 2 hour mark, I was like going crazy. And then I realized he was too. We were complete sync. And so they had an official break where you went out and they had like this little munchies and things. They were all dressed in period for the movie. And so we had this respite before we could come back in. And thank God, neither he nor I would have made it through a 4 hour movie. And so no matter how much we wanted to impress each other, that was not going to happen.
So you snuck out an intermission. Is that what you did?
Intermission was official. They had an official intermission, and that allowed us to kind of get our jitters out, and we went back and we
Oh, you
finished. It was
finished it
Gone
off.
with the Wind was the movie. It was a
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
digitally
I said the only movie I can think
remastered.
of that's long is Gone with the Wind.
That was it.
I saw
Yeah.
it when I was a ninth grader with my sister, and I thought, well, the intermission, let's go. No, no, there's more. And
Right.
actually, the movie has a more satisfying conclusion at the intermission than it does at the end. I said, we did an
Actually,
extra 2 hours, and you still don't resolve stuff. She said, I'll get him back. I said, that whatever.
right. That is
So
so true. They should have just stopped it at the 2 hour
I
part. The
could have.
intermission was it.
Yeah,
That was
exactly
it.
right. So I had, a similar story, much shorter, much more mundane. But if you're at a gas station, as you are, as I'm a lot, and I'm seeing a guy pulling with a brand new Ford white truck, and he's got this fishing rig. It's a Lund boat, and it's got all the bells and whistles. Oh, wow, I wanted that thing so bad. I wanted that rig. And I finally stepped aside and I said, no, you don't. I mean, we're 2 hours away from water. Where are you going to store that? You don't even like to fish. You don't even like to boat. And you certainly don't want to pay the insurance on that truck. And I just stood out next to myself with my hands on my hips saying, you are a moron. And I looked at myself, you're right. I don't want this. And I guess I would say if you struggle with that guy, probably the things that has helped me the most is my daily, every time I start my day, I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. All those things have to happen within the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we've had this conversation. Very grateful for it. I've enjoyed your story. I do not envy your story. I couldn't even live your story. I don't even, much of your story is new to me. I'm enjoying it without having to want it. And I think that is really that. I think that is. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. I've really enjoyed our time. I'm looking at our clock. Oh boy, I'm eating up too much of your time. But
Oh,
here's my
I'm
question.
good.
I'm going to ask you the lunch question. You can ask anybody to lunch in the world. They have to be alive today, but you're buying them lunch. Who are you going to take out to lunch, and why? And where are you going to go? And what are you going to feed them?
Mm. Mm. That was one I was hoping you weren't going to ask. Because up until only a few weeks ago, I had an answer that was so solid, 100%. And it would have been a picnic somewhere out in a beautiful field somewhere with Jane Goodall.
Oh,
100%. Like that was always my answer to that question. And I'm a little in flux right
did
now.
she pass away?
She did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was still when we talk about the passion and in living in the essence, I talk about her in one of my new videos where I said, I admire that because that passion kept her going. She actually she was traveling something like 325 days out of the year, and she was on the road when she passed. She was still going because it was that important to her. And I just wanted to know, what was it like when people came against her so vehemently? Because she knew, as I know, the intelligence that is in nature, and people were refuting it at the time. So she really had an uphill climb and identify with that quite a bit. And so she has always been the one that I would answer with a question like that. And maybe I'm still searching for the new answer. So I'll give you the old one.
Yeah. I'm surprised. Many people mention famous people, but many other people say, I want to go talk to, and it's an old friend they haven't seen for a while. Isn't that
Oh,
interesting?
yeah.
Yeah, I'd go I'd go to lunch with my dad. Oh, yeah. I really enjoy his company. And wow.
That's cool.
When I was asking it, I was thinking for, world leaders or famous people or what
Yeah.
but it was, to them, it was more about, and they said this, well, if I went with a famous person, I don't know that we'd talk about anything important. And I don't know that they would remember the conversation. Isn't that interesting? They wanted to have a conversation that was meaningful for both parties.
Yeah. Yeah.
And rather than just be the, oh, you're a famous person. Okay, yeah, you're the 700th person who's wanted to have lunch with me. So blah, blah, blah. They wanted to make sure that it was
Right.
meaningful to both parties. And so they didn't go there. Just
Wow.
for fun, I live in South Dakota, the middle of nowhere, literally. And we people always talk about Dakota. They get both North and South mixed up. I mean, they just
Sure.
they're oblivious to the fact that there's not a lot of people here, and we get used to hearing that all the time. I think it would be interesting to have lunch with probably somebody who's at the peak of the noise, Taylor Swift, at a sales barn in Ipswich, right?
Why?
Which
Why
is a
there?
because it's in the middle of nowhere. Nobody would recognize us. They would look and go like, "Huh, that kind of looks like Taylor Swift over there."
But it couldn't
But but
be.
it, but
Right.
but it would be something where I could take her out of her element. And
Mm.
animals calm people down.
Yep.
So does emptiness. So one of the things you like about South Dakota is that
Mhm.
we there's a lot of horizons and there's a lot of quiet,
Yes.
especially when you go out in these small towns and your blood pressure drops. There are people, I'm told, who on the sly come here. They're famous people. They just have special handlers who go to little tiny small towns where they can just hang out with dudes and not have to worry be that guy with the mask on.
Yeah,
So I
for
might
sure.
talk to her and just say, what are you doing? Like, what is this? Are you liking this? Because this seems like a lot of noise. I don't know that I envy this at all, and I just wonder what she'd have to say. I think
And
she's
what it
a. I
what it
think.
would
I,
be like.
yeah.
That's that's good.
I
You
think
know,
she's a. I think she's a nice person, but is
mhm.
really in a weird world. And I
Oh
wonder
yeah.
if it's hard to stay nice in a weird world like that.
Well, your question about fame, that's a whole nother level. I mean, my
Oh
level was
my.
like, down in an incy bincy area down there, but she's off the charts. Very few people in the world have that kind of recognition. And that just, it's, yeah, you have to, in order to go under the radar, is it putting on a costume just so you can feel like you again, which is so strange, right?
And you are not allowed. I mean, who even knows who you are? They just
Right.
know who they think they know you are.
Hmm.
And the
Yeah.
problem, the problem, if you're Taylor Swift, is that she's not an actress or an actor where she's portraying a different part. It's her, but people get to decide what they think that her is.
Yeah.
And the trouble is isn't if it's just what if it's just like a quarter of an eight turn off. That is just enough dissonance to make you go, oh boy,
Yes.
that's hard.
That is interesting. You said something, Jeff, about the lowering the blood pressure. And I promised that I would give you some statistics on why that feels like that when you're around horses and, as you said, large mammals. Horses, there is a company called HeartMath Institute that initiated this research. And there's an electromagnetic field for all living things. Ours
Mhm.
is about 3, 4 feet around us, and horses much, much larger. They're a larger animal, but it is exponentially larger than you would expect.
Hmm.
And it is what they refer to as being compassionate. So if you do take a human being with a slightly elevated heart rate and blood pressure and place them amidst a herd of horses that is usually calm. I mean, horses' blood, their heart rate will only be anywhere from 22 to 44 at rest, and then if trouble comes along, it'll jump up to 250, and then all of the
Mhm.
survival stuff kicks in, where their legs and the running and the whole thing, and then they calm down very quickly at the other side. But while they are in that calm state, they affect the humans to be able to drop that heart rate. So when people say, I feel better when I'm with my horse, there's actually a biological reason why.
Hmm. Hmm.
I imagine that cows would be the same. And you mentioned sheep. They're all herd animals, and generally speaking, would probably give that
Yeah,
same
and they're
feeling.
and they're and they're Cows and sheep are simple creatures. They're content. They're just they're slow moving. They have
Yeah.
a certain homey smell to them. Horses too. It's just it's. I did a funeral for a woman once who, and here's what. There's an interesting duality about horses. She loved horses. She rode horses from a young age, but she rode horses, and then a horse, kind of fell on her and shortened her life. She was crippled for much. Her pelvis was crushed.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, I do not want to work around horses. But you know what? I actually do. If you're right, and I do want to work around
Around
horses.
them.
I don't
Hmm.
have to get on top of one to
Mm-mm.
absorb all the goodies, right? Um,
Yeah.
hmm. Okay, so
I get more out of not writing these days than I do from writing.
I bet.
Yeah, it's true.
So, I mean, I have run this whole show. I've run you through the gamut. Now it's yours. You can tell me anything you want. You can blow your own horn, toot your own horns. This is your chance, Sandra. What do you need to get out there to make this time worthwhile for you?
Oh, it's been worthwhile already. It's been worthwhile just sitting here with you, and going and listening to you and your feedback and your stories about the horses and what people think, what you think of them, and I just I want to invite people to think about what nature can teach. It's not woo to say I want to go out and hug a tree, because there's actually scientific reasons why that would feel good. There's
Yeah, yeah.
actually stuff behind this, right? And especially now with the rise of I feel a real urge to be able to continue to do this work and get it out there more, which is why I said we're doing a little bit of a brand shift and change, and putting some videos that are going to be resources up on the YouTube channel and things like that. I'm doing that because I really want to encourage people to make that connection. My thought is that they will experience God through his creation, and we're part of that creation.
Hmm.
So to separate ourselves from that, um, there's a dissonance that comes in. And I think to look at what the type of work that I'm doing, not as a replacement or anything against AI, I use AI, but there's a counterbalance that has to be there as far as I'm concerned. We have to be able to center ourselves, remain in that human connectedness, and make those relationships as healthy as possible, so the compassion remains, and the bipolar stuff that we see in our country right now might actually even out a little bit if
Right,
we can
right.
encourage people to live in that compassion.
I think that one of the casualties in this we're what we're in right now is the death of trust. It's really, really hard to
Yep.
trust if AI is so good at tricking people, and people
Yes.
don't like to be tricked. It makes them anxious.
Yep.
What's your website, Sandra?
It's my name, SandraDeeRobinson.com, and the middle name spelled out like Sandra D from Greece.
When that movie came out, did your life go up or down?
I was being bullied because I was in school, so it wasn't good at the
So
time.
now wait a minute. They were bullying you because you had the same name and looked like Sandra Dee.
Yes, and how
Oh
often did
boy,
I get, "Look at me, I'm Sandra Dee, lousy with virginity." That
virginity.
was
Oh
the one
boy.
that was hounded on me, right? Because I was always I didn't hang out with a lot of the bad girls. I didn't do the bad things, the pot smoking and all that stuff. I never did any of that stuff. So yeah, that was thrown at me and wrapped around me day after day. And what's funny is, as you were saying, Jeff, people remembered it. When I started speaking in particular, I realized they'd remember Sandra Dee. They would forget my last name, but they remembered Sandra Dee. So whether it was the play, the movie, or even the old actress, there was an actress that I actually found out I was named after, named Sandra Dee.
Oh.
So they would maybe remember that, but there is always something there to that name that I disliked so much growing up, and now I'm appreciative of it.
So you have one question. You can ask me one question, any question, just one question, only one question. What is
Okay,
your one question?
my one question: out of all of the people that you have met, interviewed, sat next to, give me, and I know it might be hard to pick one, but give me one of the top people that changed your perspective on life or a large portion of life after speaking with them?
They all have a cumulative effect. What it is, it's a reaffirmation of how different we are, but how much we are the same. There was one guy that changed my life in a positive way because he taught me some practical things. His name was Art Fry. I was in an invention contest a number of years ago. I was a finalist in the Staples Invention Quest, and the speaker was going to be the guy who invented the Post-it notes. And he was going to be up on stage, and he's from Minnesota, which I grew up in, and I just wanted to shake his hand, but he was just being mobbed. No, I said, okay, forget it. I got to catch the plane and get back. I'm the last guy on the plane. There's one seat open left on the plane next to Art Fry. And and I love that
there's
because
a prayer answered.
It was way back in economy, so we're way back in the engine noise. And I said to him, I said, you could have sat up at the front. And he said to me, it was kind of cool. He said, well, and he was a humble guy, but he said something to the effect that, yeah, I've made more money for companies and economies than those guys will ever dream of, because it's true. I mean, because the Post-it notes there's factories in France, there's entire places that are cranking out Post-it notes. His idea, he said that in the company he worked at, 3M, they told you must work 8 hours a week on something that and nobody believed in his idea. It was called Art Fry's idea. In fact, it was so hated by everybody. This is why he is allowed to be called the inventor of the Post-it note instead of it being a 3M product. Now, 3M still gets all of the profits and proceeds. Art Fry has no problem with that whatsoever because he had a good life. He enjoyed what he did. He got a little bit of notoriety. If he was asked to speak some different places, he'd get that. But basically, the lesson that he taught me was that, kind of like this, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Mm-hmm.
If you're called to do it, you're called to do it. It doesn't, just pursue it. Sometimes we tell people, let me see, post hoc ergo propter hoc. It says, that this, therefore, because of this. So in other words, this guy, let's look at Steve Jobs, who is considered sometimes a jerk, right? So if you want to be successful, easy, just be a jerk. Well, okay, there is more to it than that. And so whenever somebody succeeds, we say, well, they succeeded. But there are people who never succeed, but still have certain qualities that make them successes, even if they don't succeed. Art Fry was a humble guy, a scientist, worked his job. And I just thought he was an excellent example and really a hero of living your story. And then in the fullness of time, we'll decide if it was a good story. God will be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to live a passion or pursue a passion. And also at the time, let go, as you're talking to, of comparison. It's a journey that I'm on with my shepherd. I don't have to be that sheep over there. I don't have to be that sheep. It'll be fine. And in the fullness of time, I'll be able to sit down and say, well, that was a really good story. Right.
Exactly.
Sandra Dee, what a great pleasure and honor. We'll have to let you go. But in the meantime, we'll pull up all your website and all your stuff. And I hope that, I'm a small guy out in the middle of nowhere, but who knows? This may go viral someday. Okay.
Let's hope that happens. Yes.
God bless.
Thank you.